Listeners, last week I talked about the ways human design can help you reach more readers. But what does that look like in practice? Well, this week, author Patricia Knight Meyer joins me for an experiment, a real, unscripted conversation where I read her human design chart for the very first time, and we explored what it reveals about her author platform. Patricia is about to launch Wonderland, Memoir of a Black Market Adoption, a book 10 years in the making. And she came to this conversation with a very real question. How do I build momentum without burning out? During our conversation, we explore how her design as a projector explains why pitching into the void hasn't been working, what it really means to reach readers beyond your existing community, and why resting more and following invitations may actually be her most powerful marketing strategy. Let's dive in. Welcome to Writing Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Well, hello, Patricia. Welcome to Writing Your Resilience. I am so excited to have you on the show today because we are going to do something a little different, a little experimental, and my deepest wish is for it to be very helpful to you. But before we get to what I'm calling the great experiment, I'd love for you to tell us a little about who you are and what you're up to in your writing life.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate being here. My name is Patricia Knight Meyer, and I am an author and marketer. I've been working in marketing my entire life, basically digital marketing and book publicity for a fellow author who's published 5 different books. And now I have been writing my own book called Wonderland, Memoir of a Black Market Adoption. I always said I'd write a book when I had a story to tell. And at 40 years old, when I realized that I really needed to find out who my biological parents were and also at the same time get a legal birth certificate, I began writing this book. Part of the reason that I went on that journey is because I'm what's considered a baby scoop era black market baby. And what that meant was that my parents never received, well, they used a shady attorney to obtain the baby, and that attorney blackmailed them out of $30,000 with the threat of taking me back. They never delivered my birth certificate. They never received my birth certificate. They never got any adoption papers whatsoever. And by the time I put all these mysterious pieces together at about 18, 19 years old, I was a single mom myself, standing in my birth mother's shoes. So I put off trying to figure out what the truth was behind the story. I just kept putting it off because I was a young mom and I had a career to build and so on and so forth. And then when my adoptive mother passed, that's when I realized that, and I was about to turn 40, I realized I really needed to solve my mystery. Also because the state had no record of my birth certificate whatsoever. And I realized that if I ever lost that one identifying paper that I did eventually get, that I would be unable to prove my citizenship. That paper, I believe, was fraudulently obtained by my adoptive father at some point in my teen years when I needed to get a social security card. So there are a lot of mysteries to unravel. So I wrote this book, and since then I've been needing to put it out there into the world and promote it. I queried for 2.5 years trying to find a publisher, and right when I was almost through self-publishing it myself, a publisher finally came around and I was able to get a contract with Unsolicited Press. I feel like there was a lot to learn on that journey, especially for adoptees. But now that I've got all of the my ducks in a row and the book is coming out November 3rd, I feel exhausted from the process that I've, this long journey that I've been on, at a time when I feel like I need the most energy that I could possibly have. And I think there's a lot of reasons that I feel drained the way I do, but I've recently learned that a lot of it might have to do with human design,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have some really fascinating insights for me around how I might be able to understand what my drivers are and what my obstacles are and what my strengths are using human design. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about that with you.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to share it with you. I want to take the conversation we're having right now a little deeper because, I have encountered a number of adoptees who are wanting to tell their story and they're trying to find that market like you are. And there's some similarities that I'm seeing in some of the things that they're saying about the experience that go against, I think, some of the things that we've been told around what it means to be an adoptee or how people feel about their adoptive parents or how they experience belonging, so many things in their experience. If you were to tell us just one thing about being an adoptee that you feel we all need to know that maybe goes against some of the things we've been told, what would that be?
Well, there's a lot of things that I could share. The one thing I can say is I can't speak for all adoptees, but I can speak for a lot of the adoptees that I know. And I spend a lot of time at adoption conferences and have built a very strong, supportive adoption community. And that one thing is that adoption is never a win-win situation,
Mm-hmm.
and it does not promise a better family to any adoptee. While it can be incredibly necessary in some situations, it shouldn't always be the very first option that we turn to. The adoptees that I know are very much into wanting to support the first mother, to help that mother, because adoption is ultimately first off and first most trauma. We are separated from the only mother that we know, and studies have shown that infants can pick out their own birth mother's breast milk. It is truly a core wound, and it will carry with us for the rest of our life. Adoptees are 5 times more likely to commit suicide, much more likely to have alcohol and drug addictions. I think the statistic is like 10 times more likely. So for every baby that we save, we have to understand that if there's a way to keep them with their mother, they'll be and first mothers too have a much higher incidence of suicide, fatality, and drug abuse. So it's important to us to know that the community understands that what happens to us is a traumatic experience, and a lot of the trope is, aren't we special? Aren't we lucky? And we are fortunate to have adoptive parents, many of us who are very loving in stable homes. And but there two things can be true at once, right? We are fortunate to have a family that has chosen to bring us into our homes and raise us, but at the same time, we are wounded, and we are not going to just arrive as a blank slate and not have traumas and wounds that are carried with us through our lifetime. Any adoptive parent that adopts a child needs to understand that they're adopting what I consider to be a special needs child,
Mm-hmm.
and that they will that we are not going. We were eventually going to want to know where we came from, and have access to our medical records, and ultimately just not feel magically poofed into the world. No matter how wonderful an adoptive family can be, for most of us, until we learn our truth of our origins, we never feel like a whole human being.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And I love how you started with, well, I cannot speak for all adoptees, because that's true. No one can speak for an entire community. And yet, because you have such a strong community of other adoptees that you have created in your life, there are some things that you've heard other people say that's like, oh, yes, me too. These are some of the things that happen. And one of them is that core attachment wound, right? Even if a baby is taken at birth, right, and they are adopted at birth, they have spent 9 months in someone else's womb, right? And so there is a
Yes.
connection that's there that can't be dismissed. And there
Yeah.
is that experience of wanting to know more. And so if you don't feel like you belong, if there's this sense of wholeness that is missing until you understand the mystery, there's conditioning there. And I'm saying that because that's going to play into what we're going to talk about next, which is your author platform and how we can use human design to help you build something that feels authentic to you. And I'm already seeing things right away in the stories that you've shared where I'm like, yes, and oh, I understand how. So let's talk about your author platform, right? You are an author who's about to launch a book in the world. Congratulations, first off. That
Thank
is
you.
huge.
Thank
It
you.
also can feel like a lot of pressure because now you have something that you have to sell. So tell us about your author platform. Like, what is it right now, and where is the struggle?
Okay. Well, when I first got reunited with my biological parents, I started a blog called myadoptedlife.com. And I wrote on that blog for the last 15 years
Mm-hmm.
about all of the different experiences that I was having as an adoptee and reunion. And so that blog became the core basis for my platform. And then, of course, I got on all the socials. And then I guess right around 2020, I really got involved in the adoption community online, and I didn't realize that there were adoption conferences and organizations like Concerned United Birth Parents and the National Association of Adoptees and Parents and Adoption Knowledge Affiliates. So there are all of these organizations out there designed to support the triad, both first parents, adoptees, and adoptive parents. So there were a lot of resources. And so I began to volunteer my time with these organizations. I ended up doing keynote speaking with them. That platform of my social media, as well as my blog, I host an adoption happy hour for the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where we have a guest on and we elevate each other's stories. All of this is the core of my platform. And I feel very fortunate that I have such a large network and I've connected with so many people in the community, other adoptees and first mothers who've written books, and some folks that are just those people that you can call when you're having a really down moment, or that call to you when they need support. And I think that I've worked very hard to build connection, to elevate their stories. And I think when you do that, it helps build your own
Mm-hmm.
platform. All that said, I think I speak for other adoptee authors and people in our community in general, in that sometimes we feel like we're speaking inside an echo chamber. And we all are anxious to figure out how we can go beyond the people who get it or understand the message and reach a broader audience, because we know that just statistically, there's so many more adoptees out in the world who don't know that these communities exist and would thrive in them if they could find them. So that is I think that's a common struggle for the people in our community. But as far as my platform goes, I've working on doing a lot of podcasts like this, and obviously trying to get the book out into the world. Yeah.
And what pieces of this platform are feeling really successful, or where do you feel successful?
I feel successful in my public speaking
Mm-hmm.
endeavors. I've been very lucky to be able to appear and speak at adoption conferences and events. I'll be speaking to a camp this summer
Mm-hmm.
with adoptive parents and adoptees. That one has me a little nervous. It's the first time that I've addressed that audience of adoptive parents and young adoptees. But I like a good challenge. So I do feel like I'm doing strong there. I think that, and I'm good with reaching out and talking about other people's books and promoting other people's events. I really enjoy doing that. I think that I do not spend enough consistent time working on the early steps for the book launch, such as, reaching out to find people who will praise the book or who will talk about, buy the book and then review it on launch day. I'm really struggling with promoting myself, I suppose. I'm very inconsistent about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that to really like you're supposed to have this really long news email list of people to, that have all agreed to promote your book the day it comes out. And other than having a form on my website to join the launch list, I'm not tying that to my social media as I should. And I don't know if it's just like this hesitancy. I don't want to look like I'm marketing my book because I really
Mm-hmm.
do believe in things happen organically and authentically. And so I think that I probably struggle a little bit with asking the bigger asks as
Mm-hmm.
far as, hey, would you be interested in me sending you an advanced review copy so that you can put this out in the world in November, that sort of thing. And it's also finding the time to do it. I'm a one-person show, and there's a lot of things to do around a book launch, including applying to the awards and staying on top when the awards are coming out and just posting daily, all of that.
Mm-hmm. So you just mentioned posting daily. How are you feeling about social media? And like, let's get real here. Okay. And you might see, like, I love this and this is great. So, and if that's what's real, that's great. If it's not, I want to talk about how are you feeling about like social media or other places where you feel like, I feel like I'm pitching into the void. I feel like I'm sending things out and it's not being heard. Anything
Yeah,
like that that you're facing that feels like that pain point or like, ugh, I really don't want to do this.
yeah. Well, I'm not people who see what I put out may think I might say I'm not very technically inclined. So I'll put something. People in my community always say, Patricia, the reels you put together after such and such events are so wonderful. But it takes me like 5 or 6 hours to do that
Mm-hmm.
reel because if I don't do something every day, I forget how to do it. And so then I'm relearning and I'm probably doing it the harder way. And so the voice in my head is always, you are so bad at this. And oh, there I go again, messing that thing up, having to start over again. So I get very frustrated and anxious around, I find it very hard and meticulous. And so I think sometimes I just ignore it until it's something that I really just can't ignore. And then I'll make myself, okay, you're going to spend the next 3 or 4 hours doing this, and that's all there is to it. And the voice in my head is like, why does this look so easy for everybody else? Like, what is wrong with me that I can't do this easier? The other thing that when you're talking about this that I think is just as far as you want to know what's in my head and what my really deep dark core challenges are is that I had hired an assistant who's a fabulous talented young woman to help handle all the moving parts, the details. I'm world's worst and very unorganized, and she was on top of all of it. And just as I was coming, this was all to start the book launch. And then I got laid off. And I have been making a lot of sacrifices to get this book into the world. And part of that sacrifice was I built a tiny house in my daughter's backyard so that I could live basically rent free to spend every penny that I had and extra time and energy getting the book into the world. I started that when I thought I was going to be self publishing, but also there's a lot of money that goes into traveling for marketing and all of that. And so when I lost my job in April, I felt like the rug had been pulled out from underneath me and I had to now have to go look for another job. And I had to stop using her. And so it just felt like, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there was another voice in my head that was saying, well, maybe the universe wanted it to happen this way. It's not like I'm broke. It's not like I don't know how I'm going to feed myself tomorrow. But I thought, well, maybe this is, the world saying, Patricia, this is the time for you to focus on your book and gives you all the time and energy you need to support this launch properly. And this may also have a lot to do with adoption, this feeling of, doom and worry and needing to have that security blanket in place. So there's this other feeling of like, oh, could I really do that? Can I really be that brave? Could I really just not look for a job
Mm-hmm.
for 3 or 4 months, and focus on the book? So I think I struggle a lot daily with, do I look for a job or do I focus on the book?
I really appreciate how you're sharing the behind the scenes of what it's like to really be an author, like all of the efforts that it takes, all of the money that it takes. There are a lot of things that people don't realize are part of the book launch process. And so there's a lot that you're trying to juggle on top of this unknown of, I don't have a job. And what do I do with that?
And one other thing, which is huge, is that I try to remind myself that I didn't write this book to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be successful because I want the message to get out into the world. But there really is an unlimited amount of money you can spend on a book launch. Like you
Yeah.
can apply to every single award, and sometimes those are anywhere from $200 to $600.
Mm-hmm.
You can get yourself on NetGalley, that's another $600. You can buy advertising. God knows how much you could spend doing that, right? And so how do you decide? Like, that you could also go to every single book festival on the planet. How do you decide what is enough?
Yeah.
And you know, and I keep telling myself you can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pick and choose and know what is enough for this. But this is a book I've put 10 years of my life in, and so there's this voice in my head that's like, well, you need to throw everything you have at it, right? So that's the struggle too, is
Yeah. Figuring out,
how
how
do
do you
you
work smarter rather than harder? When you have a financial ceiling, which we all do, how do you know the right ways to move forward? And so I have a lot of great things to say. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering, how am I going to come up with all of this information? Did you have these long conversations with Patricia beforehand? No, this is the first conversation we're having, and that was intentional. We had a few email exchanges. And what was interesting is one of the email exchanges was around your actual birthday, because you had these, it could have been a day in December, it could have been a day in January. Is what's on my birth certificate correct, given all of these mysteries and inconsistencies in terms of how you got your information?
yeah.
So that's the only conversation that we had. And so I'm going to share some things about you. And because we've not talked about them, I want you to just tell me, like, yes, that's correct, or no, that's not. And I don't have any attachment to it, because my goal is really to support you and to help you leave this conversation having some answers to these questions around, like, where should I place my effort? How do I go forward? And do I look for a job right now or do something different? Right. So how can I figure out what's right for me? So if I'm looking down and you're watching this on YouTube, that's because I'm looking at Patricia's body graph. And so I'm going to put that in the camera so people can see it for a second. That is what I'm looking at. And so, Patricia, some things that stood out to me as really important is, number one, you are a projector. Okay. And so for people who don't know what that is, projectors are really important. You are the visionaries. You can see into systems and people, and you know stuff, right? You have lots and lots to say. And projectors often have a deep desire to be heard, right? That's a piece of it, because you have this innate wisdom. The thing you don't always have a lot of, though, is energy, right? Your energy is inconsistent. And sometimes that means that if you're in the right environment around the right people, you can work faster than everyone else. And people are like, how did you do that? And yet, if you do work that fast, you feel exhausted. And you may find that having a 9 to 5 where you're having to work a lot is actually counterproductive to what you want to do, because it exhausts you so much. Is that
Yes.
ringing true?
Yeah, absolutely true. And it's funny because if I go to an adoption conference, I have tons of energy,
Mm-hmm.
love it. And then I come home and I crash from the how, emotionally draining it is. But I've often thought if I could be in a room with these people working 24/7 every day, I would never, like, I would be excited to get out of bed every day, right? Yeah.
You would be excited to go to bed, and then you would probably have some chronic health conditions because you would be
Maybe.
around too many people. And this is the interesting thing, is that, you're talking about a topic that is emotional. So of course there's an emotional component to this, but actually it's just being around other people's energy. So for you in particular, it's really important to have breaks, and have breaks away from other people. And that includes the people in your home if you live with other people, because you can love people all you want, but sometimes if their energy is different, that energy will exhaust you. So as an example, I'm a generator. I have that steady supply of energy. I am somewhat the Energizer bunny. If you and I were together, and especially if other things were aligned in our charts, you would do a whole lot of work and then you would feel really exhausted and you'd be like, why does this keep happening to me? It's just an energy thing. And having this time alone, right, breaks in your schedule where you are literally by yourself is important because you're highly intuitive. So there's this piece of your chart, which is your spleen, like which is a center in your body that's related to intuition, and it is lit up. And so you're a highly intuitive person, and that is actually your authority. Like, where does your yes come from? It comes from your spleen and this immediate knowing of what's right for you. And one of the things it also shows is that a piece of that is about timing. Like, right timing deep down, like it's time to do this or it's time to do that. And when you follow that, you see the world open up for you, right? And you know that you're going in the right direction. The challenge you face is that you have a defined head and ajna. So these are two parts in the up of your upper chart where it's all about the ideas and having the pressure to have a lot of ideas and then to process them, right? So you have all of that, which means sometimes it would be very easy for you to kind of make all your decisions from the neck up. What do you notice about that for yourself?
Well, I do notice that my head and heart are often torn.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that I usually regret it when I don't trust my gut instinct. I I have had experiences like with trying to choose the cover for my book. I sought a lot of external validation for my choices, and ultimately I ended up going with what my gut told me I wanted to
Beautiful.
do. I was also, though, very disheartened when it was weird. It was confirmation when people in my community were saying these aren't the right covers, but at the same time I was sort of bummed because I just wanted it to be over with.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of learned that there's some things, especially in your book journey, that you really do have to just trust yourself on. And as I've gotten older, and in my 50s, I've learned to listen to that quite a bit more. It's funny that you mentioned about needing that time away because I've worked remotely for 20 years before it was even a cool thing to do. I work
Mm-hmm.
remotely. And the thought of going into an office, I don't even look for jobs like that anymore because I know like that to me is, like you said, incredibly draining. So I do think you're very much on the right path with everything that you're saying so far.
And it's so
Yeah.
interesting that you said that your head and your heart feel torn because, again, I'm pulling this up. Where your energy, the colored parts of your chart, here's your head. That's actually your intuition and your sense of pressure around it. Look at how far apart they are. Everything
Hmm.
else is open. So, yes, you do feel split. And actually, that's another piece of it is that not just that your energy is split apart, but that, yeah, you have this innate desire for completion. So when you are out in the world, and it's interesting because it also aligns with that attachment wound, you're looking for communities where you belong, right? And looking for this sense of completion. And I think people can see that as a negative, right? Oh, why can't you just be complete in yourself? Well, sometimes our energy is looking for the plug. And that's not a bad thing. We just need to embrace, like, oh, yeah, that's how I work. I'm looking for the plug. And when I'm in those right communities, I find that plug. And I think that's really important for you because as a projector who is building an author platform, and this can feel a little tricky, like this is a piece people sometimes go womp womp when I share this, is that for projectors, you have all of this insight, all of this information that is so important. And it's really important to share it with the right communities and to be invited, right? To be invited. So, what does that mean? Doing a whole lot of pitching doesn't work. And you may find this like you've like, oh my God, I pitched all of these podcasts, or oh my God, I pitched all of these essays. And when it wasn't aligned with your inner knowing or you weren't invited, they didn't say like open call or like I did. I said, I have this episode I want to do. Who's interested? What did you do? You connected with that invitation, right? So I
Hmm.
think that's going to be really important. It's not to try to do things from your head, but to really trust in right timing, to look for the invitations, and then not just look for these invitations, but to say, is it the right invitation for me? Right? To take that extra step, that extra pause to say, what does my spleen tell me?
That's spot on. It is. And when you were talking about needing a plug to plug into, it made me realize that if I do spend too much time alone in my head, in my room, doing my thing, I feel like a pressure in my
Mm-hmm.
body, an energetic type pressure that almost feels like a pressure cooker. And
Yeah.
that it's when I do get these opportunities, like to connect with you or to go speak somewhere or, do a Zoom call with my community, I feel like it's suddenly like a release valve, like the
Mm-hmm.
steam is releasing. And I immediately feel calmer, less stressed out, more in the flow, I guess is the way you could say it. But if I don't create those moments or engage those moments when they arrive, I can feel that it's like a tension building.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were talking about things that you get invited to, it made me think about this a lot because I also, it's maybe just a theme, but it feels like in things that I've been invited to, the things that they have sometimes been terrifying. And I have a lot of anxiety around speaking publicly. And so that's, to me, I picture that as just something that's I need to grow into. Like it's a good
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to like conquer fears. But I didn't seek out the opportunity to be interviewed on Al Jazeera. Somebody just reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to talk about baby boxes?" And
Yes.
then I was like, "Oh my God, do I want to talk about baby boxes? I don't know. What do I think about baby boxes? Boy, this is a hot topic." Ultimately, I did it because they found me. I feel like when that happens, I feel like the universe wants you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know what you know about like believe about synchronicities and dates and things like that, but same situation with getting invited to speak at this adoptive parent camp in
Mm-hmm.
July. The date to apply to speak was my birth father's birthday, and the date of the camp starting was the anniversary of our meeting and reunion.
Oh, wow.
I'm a pretty spiritual person. But oddly, I didn't recognize that. I shared it with my daughter, and my daughter wrote back. She's like, "Mom, of course you have to do this. It's got spirit message all over it." And I'm like, and then I saw the dates, and I said, "Oh, well, again, it's something that I feel very challenged. It's good. I'm going to grow out of this." And that's where it gets confusing because it's like, is it my head saying, "Oh boy, this is scary," and my gut saying, "You're going to grow from this"? Or is it
Mm-hmm.
vice versa? And sometimes I can't figure out really which one is, I guess, is it always it's better to listen to your gut?
It is actually especially from a human design perspective, we are not meant to make decisions from the neck up. We all have different ways of making decisions. Yours is very intuitive. Mine is a body response to things I see out in the world. Yours, you don't necessarily have to have that external input, but you do have some sort of body knowing. And I love that you just shared something that's really important for you. Your profile, which if we were to think about, it's like the mask you wear, you have two parts to that. One is the role model and the other is the hermit. Okay. And so, what the hermit means, that's the two line, is that you're a person who needs time alone to develop your skills. You have this innate way of doing things, like a skill that people are like, how'd you do that? Oh my God, you're able to do that. Where did you go? How did you see that? They see this in you. And you're like, I don't know. I don't know. But everybody says it, right? But you don't see it. So, in order to develop that, you do have to be alone. So you need to have that alone time. So embrace that as a piece of your experience. But you do need to also be with other people so they can reflect that back to you, what that skill is, and embrace that even if you don't understand how that skill works, it's there. It is a piece of who you are, and you can trust that you can use it. The other aspect of your profile is that it's the sixth line. And so the sixth line actually has three parts. And it's interesting because it totally aligns with what your story is. In the first 30 years of life, you go through struggles, and there's all of this experimentation and turbulence, right? And not knowing. And then from about 30 to 50, there's a pulling back. There's this time when you're healing, you're trying to build a foundation, you're trying to figure things out for yourself. And then around 50, you have all this wisdom that came from all of that experimentation, all that turbulence, and the work you did to figure some things out. Right. And it sounds like for you, around age 40 was really a pivotal point of trying to figure things out. And I would also suspect a lot of emotional turmoil, challenge, things that happen because that's part of what we go through around that age. And all of that has led to this place where you now have this wisdom that you embody as the role model. So, and it's not a wisdom of like, oh, I learned all this stuff and I can, tell you all about it. No, it's like I have lived, and let me just share what I have learned from living. And so these are two pieces of your design. So when you start thinking about like, okay, what do I need to talk about? How do I need to talk about it? Those are two things you can do, because really embodying who you are, sharing little bits of your story. And when I say little bits of your story, I don't necessarily mean sharing your book, right? So you did some of that in your blog, and I invite you to share some of that in essays, right? Where you are invited to share your experience. But anytime you can just share a little story that really points out something in someone else, that's one of the ways that you can connect, and doing it from a place of joy, right? For you in particular, how are you going to get these invitations, right? It's from connecting with your own yes and following your joy. And I'm going to give you a specific example. You knew this book was important. You pitched it for a couple of years. You had a lot of rejections. All of this is very normal, and it's what happens when we start trying to publish a book. And you took matters into your own hands and you said, you know what? This book is coming out. That's a very different energy. You were living in the energy of yes. You had an expansiveness about this. It was like, I am open, it's happening. And what happened? Just when you had figured out what that looked like for yourself, you were living in your power. A publisher came to you that you probably pitched. It's not like you did nothing,
I
but
did.
you
Yeah.
pitched them. And then they were like, you know what? This is a yes.
Yeah. It was actually a year and a half later, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty common.
Yes, yes. And that's
And then,
another thing for people to hear, is that it does take a long time. And so what you did is you found your own yes, and having that energy of yes attracted this opportunity. So I
and
think part of the challenge is, how do you put yourself out there, like do some of that
yeah,
efforting, but in a way that's not about like, oh, I've got to have these outcomes.
I want to add to that too,
Mm-hmm.
the timing of it. I had already designed the cover. I already had it typographed. I'd already hired professional editors to edit it. It was basically, I mean, just a few edits shy of ready to go. And so when the managing editor there contacted me, part of our agreement, even though they are a traditional press,
Mm-hmm.
um, it worked out more almost like a hybrid arrangement, because I had already put so much financial investment into the book, and she was happy with the interior, the typography, and the cover. So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I was able to come away with the book as I truly desired it. And a lot of people who go with traditional publishers, they give up control over the cover. They
Yes.
give over what's inside the book completely. And so I got the best of both worlds. I got the literary credibility and endorsement for the book and support for the distribution and all of that. But I also got to keep all of the design elements that meant so very much to me. And so I really do feel like you were right. Like when I decided, like, well, I'm not going to let this stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a more positive headspace. That is truly when things began to turn around, for sure. And what you said about the 40s, that was a very difficult time, like
Yes.
30s and 40s. Lost my mother, reunited with both my biological parents. The reunion with my birth mother went horribly wrong.
Mm.
Uh, got a divorce because the spouse was very threatened by my reunion with my birth father. And within a year, I lost my job, and the house I was living in burned down. I mean,
Yep.
I couldn't have gotten any lower than that. Um, and now at this time in my life, a lot of that, some of that is in this book. Some of it will be in the next book I want to write. Now, whenever bad things happen, that is a wonderful reference point to,
Mm-hmm.
hey, at least all that stuff's not happening, right?
Right.
Things can always be a lot worse, and I try to live in that sort of a place of appreciation and gratitude.
I love that because, and it's so important because we can take that time and go, oh my God. And then we can build fear around it. Like, oh my gosh, is that going to happen again? And I work with so many people who have, this is your Uranus opposition period, usually about 38 to 44. The peak is 40 to 42. Shit is hitting the fan during that period of time for most
Interesting.
people, and it's there not to punish you but to help you become your full authentic self. There is something that you have to tap into to move through that, and if you can fully embrace it, that is how you get to this place right now where you're like, wow, I have a lot of uncertainty, some things have happened that I would not wish on myself, and yet because I have gone through all these other things, I have the faith and the wisdom to go through it because I've already done that and this is not nearly as bad. So that's part of that. I'm sharing that just to say that's part of the wisdom that you bring to the table that you can talk about, right? Because you will have to put yourself out there in a certain way. But this is the energy I want you to think about with your social media, with everything. Is just, I am here, right? Not look at me, not listen to me, not and don't give away all of your secret sauce, right? There's things that you know that are your proprietary things, and I would say they're the things in your book that are most important. Don't just give those away if there's not an invitation, because that is something that will lead to bitterness. And you probably already know that if you look back in your life, you've had like, oh, yes, I remember when I did this in this certain way, maybe not with your book, but with something else. And you're like, yeah, I learned that lesson. Really think about that as you are working to build your platform. And like, you're here just to say, like, I am here to be invited and I'm having fun. So do things that are fun and don't worry about being part of like the content machine. I know you're going to feel this pressure, especially now, like I've got to be the content machine. I've got to be in all the places and all the time, and I've got to be posting all I can. You don't. You don't. This is the counterintuitive piece.
Yeah, good to
What you
hear.
need to do is listen to your gut, and when your gut says post something, post it. And really when you're thinking about your platform, think about going deep rather than broad. And that might mean that your platform isn't for everyone, or that you're not reaching millions of people, though you could, because Taylor Swift is also a projector, just like you. So it's not that you can't, but that if you're worried about it and you're trying to force it, well, that definitely will not work. But
Yeah.
just having that openness will lead to incredible invitations. And so another part of it, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to just share a final question, is that you said, well, okay, I know how to reach adoptees, or at least the adoptees who are part of this community, right? Because you go to the conferences, you are part of all of these communities, but how do we reach others? Maybe adoptees who aren't part of this network don't realize that they're not the only one who has these experiences. But I would say, and this is the piece you may or may not be thinking about, is how do I reach the people who also feel like they don't belong, or the people who are also a part of one of the themes of your book, right? Because part of what helps a book expand its audience isn't just necessarily, it's like reaching your niche audience really, really well. That's job number one. Job number two is saying, like, who else? And
Yeah.
then how can I speak to that?
That's a very good point you make, because a large part of my story is about the fact that when earlier in our conversation, when I said adoption doesn't necessarily guarantee a better family, um, I love my adoptive parents. They did the very best they could, and they loved me deeply. However, I think that the trauma of raising a baby that no court had called their own exacerbated their addictions. My mother was an alcoholic and very verbally abusive, and my adoptive father, who was about 300 pounds when I was adopted, he grew to 650
Mm,
pounds before he passed away in my early 20s. He couldn't walk. He was very disabled throughout my life. There were a lot of fatherly things he couldn't do because of his weight and his pain. And so, I do think that there's an audience for people who are interested in addiction. When they talk about comparisons to my story, uh, I often talk about The Whale, the movie The Whale,
Yes.
if you're familiar with that,
Mm-hmm.
and The Glass Castle. Those two pretty much sum that up. So I do believe that this is a story not just for adoptees, but also 1 in 5 people know or are related to someone who is adopted. So
Mm-hmm.
there's also, a strong connection for people who are just interested in learning more about the adoptee mindset as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say also people who are dealing with family secrets.
Oh, yes, that too. Yeah, a
Because
lot of
there is
family
a big
secrets.
piece about secrets. And so
Yeah.
here's what I want you to do. It's like I'm sharing this information with you. Later on, when we are not on this podcast, I want you to go back over some of this and just say what feels right for me. What feels right, and you can ask other people's opinions if you want to, but they don't matter as much as your own, right? What does
Mm,
your gut say? And then tell me about it later. I am curious. But I
yeah.
want you to just really pay attention to those things because that's how you're actually going to grow your author platform. I'm going to reiterate a couple of those things and then I want to see what your takeaways are from this. And so, really, like, understand where your yes is. That is your spleen. Lean into the fact that you need to be alone until you don't. And that sense of pressure is a signal that you're ready for connection. The connection is important, and connection is going to help you learn something or be a part of your chart that you're not able to do when you're alone. Depth is really important, and allowing yourself to show up in a way that invitations are possible, but that, like, let go of the idea that I have to pitch a whole bunch of places. Tell people, I am really interested in being on podcasts. You can say
Mm,
that, you say it today, or you don't have to try to put out that energy because it's largely not going to work. And I'm not saying that to be discouraging. It doesn't work for
mhm.
me either because of how my chart works. I've had to let it go, and it's actually been freeing to be like, "Oh, I don't have to put my energy out there like that." Oh my god, unless I feel that inner urge, that pressure that you're talking about, then I do it. So those are some of my takeaways. I could of course talk about tons of other things in your chart, but what do you want to take away from this conversation?
Well, I tell you, it is a little liberating and freeing to hear you say these things, right? Because there's things that have been, that little voice in my head has been, after me, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that.
Mhm.
When really everything that you've told me is very validating. You've allowed me to look back on the greatest opportunities I think that have come along and recognize that how they came into my world and how I believe I attracted them. And you're right, a lot of it was not about pounding the messages out there, and it doesn't come naturally. And I don't feel it in my gut. And I think you've given me permission to really just, if anything, a reminder and validation that when you really do listen to your core, uh, and get out of your head, that's when the best things happen. Um, and I actually am really curious, and maybe you could share with me after or now, I don't know. How do I learn more about my own specific human design in relation to all these different things that you're telling me about? Because I'd love to learn more about this.
Well, I will give you a few different options. One, I am going to go over some of these things in a deeper way on May 27th when I teach Build an Author Platform that aligns with your design and nervous system. So, we're going to talk about the practical aspects of that and repeat some of these things because human design is its own language. You told me you've been doing some research, so like, oh my God, there's all these things. And so, repetition is important. I will also very soon have reports that are for sale where people can learn more about that. And I do offer some individual work and group work around human design, which is going to be coming in the fall. Because here's what I really am coming to understand about it is, learning these aspects are great, but really you're meant to live your design. And so having places where You can have accountability. You can talk about, oh, I tried this, here's how it worked, or oh, what about this or this idea? And you can experiment over time, I think is more beneficial, because as you're seeing right now, it's like, oh, well, okay, these are the experiments in the past that worked for me, right? This is how I got these invitations. Now the goal is, okay, how do I replicate that? This has been such a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And listeners, if this speaks to you, if you have questions about human design or how that pertains to your author platform or another specific part of your life, I would love it if you would share your comments on YouTube or reach out to me, because I would love to hear what that is. But for now, let us know how people can reach you and connect with you if they want to learn more about the adoptee mindset, if they are adoptees and they're like, oh my God, we need to connect, or they just want to support you as an author.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, I think the main place to go to is my website, which is there is a memoir page there if you're interested in the book. On that page, you can sign up for a launch list, which will keep you up to date on all about what's going on with the book, when it's coming out, and also some free giveaways that I have going on. So people can join there. I'm also on all the socials, either under @myadoptedlife on TikTok and Facebook, Patricia, and then on Instagram @somebody'sbaby. But all of those socials are on my website. Really the best place to connect with me. Also, I can hook you up with any of the adoptee organizations. I have a lot of resources, books, and links for adoptee support and networking on the site as well. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And listeners, all of that will be in the show notes. Oh, yes.
And this is the book you're looking for.
Beautiful. So if you are listening, Patricia just shared her book, so you can see it if you go to YouTube. Also, if you go to YouTube, it's funny, we talk about Easter eggs in stories, which are like, you know, these little gems. And I'm seeing a little gem in your background that you have a very sweet bunny who has hopped around. So that is a lovely thing that listeners can look for towards the end of this episode, because your bunny is so adorable. So we will talk about your bunny afterwards. For now, I just want to thank you so much for being here, for being part of this experiment, and for playing with how human design can help you embrace more of who you are.
I am so looking forward to putting it all into practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to connect with Patricia, learn more about her book, Wonderland, Memoir of a Black Market Adoption, or support her launch, please see the show notes for this episode. And if you'd like to take today's conversation a little deeper, get out your journal and write about this. Think about a time something meaningful came to you through an invitation rather than effort or force. What did that feel like? And what made you say yes? You can make my day by sharing your thoughts in the comments. And speaking of your thoughts on the podcast, I'd like to give a quick shout out to You Babble, Roshanra Healer, and Nikita Kane 6899 for sharing your reflections on my recent episodes with Tia Levings and Sue Williams Silverman. It was so wonderful to hear from you. And listeners, if you haven't reached out yet, you can make my day too by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts on YouTube. I would love to hear from you. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this podcast without your support. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3, join my engaged dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 tools to transform self-doubt into self-support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.